So let me start off by saying thanks to Simon. Simon has a long history here in DC and a long history as an entrepreneur. I remember in his famous book, Code, Larry Lessig dedicated the book to Charlie Nesson with the inscription, "To Charlie Nesson, whose every idea seems crazy for about a year." And in Simon's case, the way that you might write the inscription is to Simon Rosenberg, whose every idea seems super geeky for about 2 years. And then becomes mainstream. And it's been the pioneering work that you've done actually at the intersection of politics and technology that in some sense has brought us here today. It mainstreamed a bunch of things that seemed very foreign in the Washington environment. In a lot of ways, you've been most responsible for bringing Silicon Valley and Washington together. So my being here in some sense I should blame on you. What Simon just said is absolutely right, which is that there is an underlying urgency to what we're talking about today, which is a political, grand strategic urgency for the United States, which is that we find ourselves in a global competition among other models for society. And the imperative to make our model work, of course, is in order to bring economic growth, prosperity, political stability, and so forth to our citizens, and for the freedom and the rights that protect the freedom and the rights that we enjoy. But if we're going to accomplish that, we've got to renew this government. We have to renew this system of administration that we've got. We have to make the American people feel that the government is, in fact, working for them. And so when we talk about openness, we're talking about kind of a broader set of things than just simply open doors and windows that allow you to see what's going on. It's actually trying to deliver a government that functions dramatically better than what we've been used to. From the very small, rudimentary tasks of everyday interaction with the government, like getting your licenses renewed online so you don't have to wait in line anymore, to the grand policy-making functions of the federal government, like how much should we tax and whom should we tax. All of those interactions, I think, are susceptible to being retooled and improved through technology. Let me start off by trying to set the context for where we are today. I just want to say a few words about why it is that open government is becoming a big, sexy topic now. And a lot of it has to do with really the technology itself and where it's come from and how far it's come. The prediction that Gordon Moore, who started Intel, made in 1964, which has become known as Moore's Law, was the prediction that the number of transistors that you could fit onto a chip would double roughly every 18 to 24 months. What that means in practice is that the power of a given unit of chip, so the same size and money chip, doubles about every 18 to 24 months. Or the amount of computing power that you can get doubles every 18 to 24 months for the same amount of money, or that your costs go in half every 18 to 24 months. So anyway, this prediction, which is described as a law, but is really just a prediction, is proven to be miraculously true over the last 40, 45 years. There's endless debate about whether it's going to continue indefinitely, but it has proven to be true. So what this means is that the same size and price chip basically gets 10 times bigger, better every 5 years. And a way to think about that in just practical terms is to compare the computer industry or the technology industry, broadly speaking, with the automobile industry. If we had had the same rate of improvement in the auto industry, a brand new car that cost you $20,000 in 2005 would cost you $2,000 today, new, and would cost you $200 in 2015, new. You could get the exact same car. That's the rate of change that we've had. Another way to think about this is that right now, you can go and spend about $190 at Best Buy and buy a terabyte of memory that will sit in the corner of your desk and back up your computer. As recently as 1993, a terabyte of memory would have cost you about $2.5 or $3 million, and it would have taken a refrigerator-sized stack of motherboards to deliver. So anyway, that's how far we've come. So a lot of this open government stuff that we are talking about is because the cost of information has plunged. The cost of creating information, the cost of distributing information via the internet, the cost of accessing that information through your mobile phone or whatever you might have gets smaller and smaller. When I was back at Google, one of the big surprises was to realize that it was in a declining cost business. Each unit of computing power was cheaper this year than it was the year before. So the metaphor then that I want to highlight, the kind of metaphor for the transformation that is possible technologically now, is the transition from the telephone network to the internet, from the PSTN, or the public switch telephone network that we all grew up with, to the TCP/IP world that we are now living in. And what I mean by that metaphorically is that the PSTN was characterized as being a closed network. It was a channel-switched network. A dedicated channel had to be opened between each point on the network that wanted to communicate with each other. It was centralized. It was tightly controlled. It was largely built on proprietary technology developed by the telecom companies themselves, with some standards that they used to interconnect with each other. It was a hardened network that produced astonishing levels of achievement in uptime, for example, but built around a hardened model. And it was vertically integrated. Broadly, you can say that it was a network where the power lay in the core. It was a core-powered network. The sum total of innovation, for a couple of decades in the telephone network was voicemail and call forwarding. That was it, because those were changes that could be implemented at the core of the network while everybody retained the little 12-button, speaker in, speaker out little boxes that they had sitting at their homes. So we've now moved to a TCP/IP world where where the telecom companies and the ISPs and others provide network services that are characterized as being open. They are packet switched. They are decentralized networks. They are distributed in terms of power. They are standards-based. They are resilient rather than hardened. And they're built on a layers model, where the application layer can be provided by somebody other than the provider of the hardware. The service is different from the hardware. And so what that means is power is now at the edge. So I, with this laptop sitting in front of me here, can decide what applications I want to run, what programs I want to download, what I want to do with it, who I want to talk to, and so forth and so on. So that's metaphorically the world that we've moved into. We've gone from a PSTN to a TCP/IP world. And there are these very interesting parallels in other parts of the world that are going through the same kind of a transition. If you look at air traffic control, we're in the middle of a large multi-year switch from the traditional air traffic control system to a new system in which planes will be empowered to fly direct routes rather than having to follow squawk radio corridors across the country. They will be in direct satellite communication. They will be able to sense other airplanes around them. They'll be able to communicate directly if need be. In general, your flights should be faster, more efficient, less prone to congestion, all because we've made airplanes more autonomous and given them more channels and paths of communication that they can use to reach their destination. It's almost like they're becoming packet switched rather than circuit switched. Similarly, we're trying to pull off something like this in emergency responder communications, which is instead of having emergency responders rely on these old push-to-talk Motorola devices, you want to give them a multiplicity of ways to get their communications out. If the Verizon wireless network is the one that is strongest and best for them, they should have a device that can talk to that, or do a push-to-talk, or mesh their way out to a tower, and then to a police car nearby, and so forth. So again, it's putting power in the edge of the system rather than concentrating in the core. So the question for government is, can government move from a core-controlled to an edge-empowering system? The way Tim O'Reilly says this is, can government become a platform? So do the things that it uniquely can do, but then leave everything else to people out in the world. So the project then for government that captures this is what we call the Government 2.0 project. This is the project of trying to achieve transparency, participation, collaboration, and efficiency and effectiveness using the technologies that I've just described, using Moore's law, using these new architectural models of power to the edge. So I'm going to basically skip over the examples that I usually drill into here, because I think a lot of them will be obvious, and I'm going to do a little bit of showing and telling later. But let me highlight a couple of the state examples that are interesting. We've seen places like Washington, where we are today, do all kinds of interesting things with data that follows the model that I just described. A great one is something that they call CapStat. Most of you probably haven't used this, but I recommend that you check it out sometime. Basically, what CapStat does is it tries to take real-time government data, real-time data that's coming into the government, and put it out on maps so that people can see what's going on. So if you do if you do a Bing search for this and you find the CapStat page, what you'll see is a map that shows different chunks of DC, and then you can choose different data layers. And among the data layers that you can choose to see in whatever area you want to see are things like 311 calls. So So every time somebody calls the city 311 number to report a pothole or a meter is broken or whatever they want to report, it immediately gets ticketed by the person taking the phone call, so they assign it to some agency. And then you can look on a map and see what the complaint was, where it is, and you get to see who it was assigned to, what agency is responsible for following up. This kind of technology has allowed, when he was mayor, Martin O'Malley in Baltimore, to make a 48-hour pothole guarantee. And part of the way that they did it was by making this whole process open to the public so that citizens could learn what to expect and what to do. What are the obstacles to achieving this sort of thing? There are many. I won't go into them in grave detail. Let me just point out a couple of things which get in the way. We have all of these excruciating procurement and acquisition rules in the federal government that make it very difficult to use standard Web 2.0 services in government. So let's suppose you want to put up a profile page for an agency on Facebook. One of the first questions that the procurement lawyers ask is, well, do we need to competitively bid that? Does Facebook need to come in and competitively bid to be the provider of a homepage service to the federal government? Because they're providing a service, it's for free, and maybe some other social network like Orchid or something wants to come in and bid for it anyway. Well, it's completely nonsense because, right, it's a community that exists and you want to tap into it, and we've had to work our way through that. Similarly, agencies are prevented from, and appropriately so, should not be carrying advertising. And so if an agency has a website or an advertising-supported free web service, is that agency going to be associated with the ads that are running on it, and could that lead to some implication that the agency blesses or favors them, which is what we have rules to stop. There are even problems with things like indemnification provisions and legal jurisdiction and venue, which come in the terms of use, the sort of standard terms of use agreements that you have to click on websites. Those agreements will always, for example, say what state law applies to disputes under the terms of use. The federal government can't agree to be bound by any state law, so you can't just randomly sign up for some service that would require you to be bound. It also generally provides for unlimited liability for the user, and the federal government has a law that prevents any government employee from signing up for liability over a certain amount without going through a certain process. So anyway, there's all of these sort of things that get in the way, that, where our approach has been to try to solve it through the GSA, or General Services Administration, signing up for one agreement that everybody can sort of get on board with. Anyway, there have been lots of those kinds of headaches which are significantly slowing down our ability to do uptake. So let me get into the strategy and where we are today. For the Obama administration, the strategy has been the following. First, we got a presidential memorandum on open government and transparency out on day one, literally January 21st, 2009. This was President Obama's first executive memorandum. It set forth the transparency, participation, and collaboration principles, and set in motion a process that concluded, I shouldn't say concluded, that reached another milestone in December. Over the course of 2009, we decided we were just going to throw stuff out and get things up and running and try to make as many sort of experimental runs at these principles as we could. We launched a website called data.gov, which is basically a place to find machine-readable data feeds. The data here is of wildly varying quality and utility. Some of it is extremely interesting and useful. Some of it is less so, to say it politely. But getting federal agencies in the habit of getting their data up online in, and this is crucial, machine-readable formats that can be remixed, mashed up, borrowed, and put to use by any application developer. That was the principle we wanted to establish. We've gone from 48 data sets on day one to more than 160,000 today, and there are many more yet to come. We put a lot of focus on recovery.gov, which was trying to give very detailed information about where the Recovery Act dollars are going, who's getting them, where they're located. This has been a great exercise because it has shown all of the sort of pluses and minuses. You really can get an astonishing degree of detail about where that money has gone, and yet there are limitations. It's hard to get subcontractor data when you've given the money out to a contractor. Oftentimes the sources of the data are wrong. There was a funny sort of blip in the reporting at one point when people used erroneous zip codes, and so, anyway, there's data quality problems. But of course they were there, and there was, like a CNN 24-hour thing about how we were using imaginary congressional districts or something like that. And isn't that a sign that this whole transparency thing is a fraud? Well, the answer, to this has to be, of course there are going to be screw-ups. Of course some of the data is going to be inaccurate. And part of the beauty of making it all publicly available is that people will tell you when you've got bad data, and then you can go and fix it. If you do, in fact, go and fix it, then the whole process works. If you don't go and fix it, then it really is kind of a sham. And I think the challenge for us is to try to prove that we can rigorously follow up as we get complaints and as we get notifications, and prove that we can really get the data right. Another one which I'm a big fan of is the IT dashboard, which is something my colleague Vivek Kundra has focused on, which is basically a sort of a report card for government IT spending. So each IT project gets listed up here and has to be graded sort of green light, yellow light, or red light, depending on whether it is on time and ahead of budget, stalled, or over budget and behind schedule. And so this is a first draft. There's still going to be a lot of improvements yet to come on this as we get, again, better data, get people in the habit of reporting and so forth. But the idea is, for a lot of the money that government spends, you should be able to go and see on highway dollars, on IT spending, and anyway, anything you can think of. How's the project doing? Are we getting value for money? What Secretary Shinseki at the Veterans Administration did was he was able to use an effort like this, not the same one, but an effort like this, to freeze, $21 million, 121? Now I'm forgetting. Actually, I think I have this in my slide. Was able to freeze a whole bunch of spending for projects that were, behind schedule, and here we go. $200 million, sorry, 45 VA projects he was able to identify and freeze because they were so far behind schedule and so off of the deliverables that they were supposed to be providing. A new one that we just launched, which I'm kind of psyched about, is the OIRA dashboard. You have to be a real government geek to get excited about this, but this is a dashboard where all of the rules that are in process in the federal government have been captured by agency. You can see charts by rule stage. You can see them by the length of review. Oops, that says error in loading data. I wonder if my connection is down. Let me try reloading the page. But anyway, what it allows you to do is see, again, with very fine-grained detail, and the ability, by the way, to, I lost my internet connection. That's the problem here. Let me see if I can get it back. Anyway, fine-grained detail, all of the rules that have been proposed, you can kind of graphically see what agencies are hosting them, how long have they been going on for, what's the economic impact, and so forth, and then drill down to see the rule itself, click through to the page that allows you to make comments if the comment period is still open, and so forth. Anyway, it's an effort to be pretty transparent about that stuff. On the White House side, I'll just quickly run through. We've put up an Open Government Initiative page, which tries to kind of collect everything that we've got going on. We've done experiments like Open for Questions with the President, where we let anybody submit a question. People could vote thumbs up or thumbs down on each of the questions submitted, and then we posed the top-ranking questions, including, by the way, the marijuana legalization question, which seems to crop up towards the top of every single public consultation that we do. You want to talk about how to create jobs? Legalize it is always one of the suggestions. How should we be, what should the new, program for human spaceflight in NASA be? Turns out that legalizing it has something to do with that. Maybe it's an alternative to human spaceflight. We've put up White House Live, where we're making increasing use of the sort of online ability to sort of do real-time interviews with staff, not just the president, but with staff people that are experts in given areas, take real-time questions in from the web, let people rank them, and then answer those questions. We're trying to make this as accessible as we can. A lot of the agencies, like the Federal Communications Commission, have been doing their own versions of this. So on the net neutrality debate, the Federal Communications Commission put up openinternet.gov. The NTIA put up something called Broadband Match. So they've got a website called Broadband USA, and one of the big issues with the broadband stimulus dollars is, how do you get potential applicants to be able to know about each other and submit joint applications where it makes sense? So they put up a website called Broadband Match, which allows you to do that. In the health IT area, electronic health records are a big deal. They've done an incredibly transparent process of working groups that meet in public, webcasted, take questions online, put proposals out for public comment, and so forth. And at HHS, they've even been doing an interesting open source programming project themselves called Connect, which is an effort to build a set of software tools that will enable hospitals and providers and insurers and other people to connect with each other. And they do things like codeathons, where they just invite open source programmers. There's one coming up in April in Miami, show up and spend 2 days helping us make this work. And the reason that people do is because this is something that could really make a big difference in the healthcare system if we can get it right. One that I want to mention that I'm just kind of psyched about, and again, it's pretty geeky, is the Federal Register. So one of the things we were able to do this year is get the Federal Register published in XML format. So XML is like machine-readable format. So the reason that this is important is because the Federal Register is everything that the federal government is doing. You know, it gets published in the Federal Register, and it's kind of like official. But it's also 70,000 pages a year, you know. So there are actually businesses, you know, that exist here in Washington where their only job is clients pay them money and they keep up with what's in the Federal Register, and they basically tell their clients, you know, here's a thing that's relevant to you. So that's brain dead, and we've got this out in XML format now where the value that other people are going to have to provide is going to have to be something better than that. Now, in an XML world, services like FedThread have been launched that allow you to, for example, just enter a search query like your town or your zip code, or you might be interested in like toxic emissions or something. And now you will get an email every time that a Federal Register item gets posted that includes that search term. Free, right? Doesn't cost anybody anything. It's a brilliant service and the kind of thing that we're hoping to see. All right, so let me wrap up then. So in December, we posted the President announced the Open Government Directive. So this was the more detailed consequence of this initial Open Government Memorandum. And it set a series of deadlines for agencies to get their acts together in various ways, 45, 60, 90, 120. We've now passed the first two of those deadlines. The first one was that agencies should post 3 high-value data sets. They all did that. They're up on data.gov. Not everybody agrees that all of these are high-value data sets. And there's been a robust debate about that. In fact, my friend Jim Harper at the Cato Institute put up grades of the agency's data sets. You can see there are a lot of D's and F's here in terms of how valuable they are. A couple of A's. I do want to note that let's see, Executive Office of the President got an A from the Cato Institute. When is the last time that happened? In addition, every agency has now designated a high-level official that is responsible for open government. Their names are listed on the White House website. Every agency has designated a member. Well, these are the senior accountable officials. This is the working group. Every agency has designated a member of an open government working group that the White House is chairing. We've posted a dashboard that is a very early draft of what this is going to look like, but it's basically the similar sort of thing. It's color-coded, green, yellow, red, essentially grading of the agencies on all the criteria that we set. This was pretty easy so far because these are the things that are pretty high profile. And what we're going to try to do is really drill down on the expectations and requirements that we have of the agencies and publicly show who's doing it and who's not. Every agency has now posted a page that is their url.gov/open that collects all of the resources, lists the people, shows the contacts, shows what they've got going on at a given moment. Yet to come is going to be a framework for prizes and challenges. That's something that we like using. It's a whole new set of incentives to get people to program things and contribute, free labor in some cases, but to highlight what people can do out in the world with the things that we're doing. And then at 120 days, every agency has to actually publish their own open government plan. So in their own context, what they think they're going to do. And OIRA is going to be publishing a review of government information policies. In other words, the rules and regulations that relate to what we can publish and when, that hopefully will open the floodgates for a lot of the things that have been restricted. So back up to 30,000 feet. The real challenge here is to change the culture of government. So we can provide all the tools that you want to provide, but if people still believe that hoarding information, controlling access to information is how they're going to succeed bureaucratically, we are not going to change the culture of government. People have got to understand that they've got an incentive to share, an incentive to be open, incentive to be collaborative, an incentive to be participatory, and to do that, we've got quite a bit to do. The White House role, of course, is to push. We often call this coordinating, but what this really means is pushing agencies, pushing their policies, pushing their practices, pushing what I think of as new product development. In other words, cooking up new and awesome things that they could be doing that would make them look good, would make their bosses look good, that fit within their budgets. For all the reasons that I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, a lot of the tools that we're talking about are a lot less expensive than the old Washington model of massive contractor builds you huge dedicated infrastructure and software to run on top of it and maintains it for 10 years at enormous cost. Instead, we're looking at a world where you buy a network connection over here, you buy commodity computing services over there, and then you flexibly build, roll out, and iterate whatever it is you need to meet your needs at the moment. And in terms of changing culture, what I've been saying to government audiences is, ask what machine-readable geodata code and web services your country can give to you, and ask what startups, geodata mashups code and visualizations you can give to your country. So on that note, I will say, with the urgency that we need to change this government in order to compete globally and in order to win that classic battle, that colossal battle of our age, which is open systems versus closed systems, democracies versus top-down authoritarian governments, starting here at home, this is the contribution I think we can make. Thank you.